Actor Robert De Niro has reversed course in a highly controversial documentary film. His prestigious Tribeca Film Festival will no longer feature a film called VAXXED.
De Niro initially defended the decision to screen the film at Tribeca.
But after mounting pressure over the weekend, the decision was made to cancel the screening.
I have nothing but respect for Robert De Niro and Tribeca. I can't imagine what type of pressure came down that would make them pull a movie that they were obviously behind in the beginning.
If VAXXED would have been quietly screened at Tribeca and been summarily ignored, I don't know what would have happened. But instead, news outlets were covering the fact that Robert De Niro himself had pulled VAXXED from the Tribeca Film Festival.
That was a bad moment. That was a really, really bad moment.
Working on VAXXED was extremely stressful. It was interviewing lots of parents and hearing their stories. So for when we heard that we got into Tribeca, I was so excited on behalf of them and us that our stories finally would be heard around the world. When we got pulled from Tribeca, it was just like a massive punch in the gut. The parents, yet again, have no voice.
That was the worst 3 days of my life until early the following week.
There was a bit of controversy, some headlines at the beginning of this year's festival when it was announced that this film called VAXXED would be screened.
All I wanted was the movie to be seen. People can make their own judgment, but you must see it.
With this controversy, probably more people will see this movie.
Yeah, as they should, as they should.
It was an extraordinary moment, and it really brings home how censorship works or doesn't work for the other side. They'd never confronted anything like this before. They'd never had to deal with a film like this, and they censored it. And the censorship caused it to explode.
Everybody is now wondering about this movie that nobody wants you to see.
Everybody learned about VAXXED, and everybody wanted to see VAXXED.
We get a call from Angelica Film Center that said, we want to screen your film this Friday. And we're like, this Friday? We weren't going to be screening at Tribeca till like 3 weeks from now. Can we at least go with the same screening date that we were planning on for Tribeca? And they said, no. You're the biggest social media story in the world today. We don't know how long that's going to last, and that's why we're offering you this opportunity.
We've got no money, we've got no posters, we've got no publicity, we've got nothing, but we've been given 3 days to decide whether we want to take the Angelica Theatre in New York. And we said yes. The experience at the Angelica was astonishing. People came in their hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and packed that theatre out for weeks.
When the Angelica Theatre picked it up, the theaters were packed. People couldn't stop talking about it. And the amount of notoriety, this was a real game changer.
The reception for the film was astonishing, and it just caught fire from that point forward.
From that moment on, we were on tour, flying from one venue to another, Q&As. Stories are coming from the people of America. Premieres in each city. What was obvious very, very, very early on was the amount of parents that had watched VAXXED and then afterwards wanted to come up and tell their story. They'd say, I identified with your story. And they wanted to say, this happened to me. And the line for these parents with their stories got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So I said to Andy and Dale, you do the whistleblower and answer all the questions on the science side and how you make the film, and I'll take the parents' stories. There wasn't enough hours in the day to be able to get these stories. It was obvious that we had a way bigger problem than we ever anticipated. Thank God for Periscope. Periscope, the most amazing thing that happened as we traveled around was Periscope, because what it meant was the world could join in.
as long as there's a hashtag, and for this it was hashtag Vaxxed, people from all over the world could find that hashtag. They could press a button that said they wanted to follow it every day, and that's what happened. We knew that there were all these vaccine-injured families like myself and so many other people that they hardly ever get to get out of their homes. So we knew that there was a real solid group of people that would be very interested in this movement, allowing people to feel like they were there at the event.
Our community grew and grew and grew and grew because of Periscope.
It provided the opportunity for people to be there.
We were live to the world. While we were hearing the story, the world was hearing the story. And that encouraged everybody to have hope and to keep going and to tell their story.
We were exhausted. I mean, it just didn't stop. We were on planes every other day, going to a new theater, a new city. And I remember Polly was sitting there and she said, "We need a bus."
Getting a bus of some kind to travel on the ground, to be with the people on the ground, was the way to go forward, because we were missing so many stories and so much time wasted just sitting in airports.
In usual Polly form, I think it was like 14 hours later, she's like, "I found a bus."
VAXXED has just bought an RV.
Woohoo!
You know, we were sitting there and she was like, if we painted VAXXED on the side of it, everywhere we went, there would be a billboard that the world would see about our film. Since no one will advertise, no one will give us any advertising, let's get a bus.
The VAXXED van, the VAXXED RV is coming.
Once I went live on Periscope and said, we're going to get this bus, Dell called me, you haven't even checked it out, did you check it out?
Polly, did a mechanic go through it before you bought it?
It's like, no, I just bought a bus.
You know, it's kind of the way it all had to be.
The main thing that mattered was it had a good engine and it only had 10,000 miles on it. And at this point, remember, we're only thinking of just traveling around and getting a few stories. We're never going to do the big nationwide tour that we have now done. We're really grateful to you guys.
Well, we're grateful for what y'all are doing. I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I know somebody that this affected. I watched it happen with my own two eyes. She was a perfect, normal little girl, and the next day, totally different child.
We need to hear these stories. That's what we're doing. I want to hear from every person.
Good job, brother. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
The VAXXED bus is arriving. Billy is about to sign the back of the bus.
Every single child, every person in America who has been injured by a vaccine in any shape or form, whatever vaccine it is, should sign this bus.
Thank you. I've done that.
So one of the most interesting people that we worked with on the bus, in fact, this person worked with me from the beginning right into the end, was Anu. Anu came to us, but when he came to us, he didn't really believe the vaccines were the problem that we were seeing.
I hadn't seen VAXXED the movie yet. The first thing that I really said to the team was, listen, I understand what's going on with this film and the MMR vaccine and its possible link to regressive autism, but I'm not sure if I'm completely on board with you with this idea that vaccines cause other damage.
When we set out on the road to record stories, I think in the back of my mind, I thought I was going to get thousands of autism MMR stories. And it wasn't long, day 2, that we hit our first big eye-opening experience, which was Hannah Robinson.
Yeah, I had all 3 Gardasil shots. I was, on Christmas Day, I woke up and I threw up every 30 minutes for an entire day. And I never knew why until looking back.
And she would kept complaining with her neck hurting severely. And at school, she would be texting me that her heart was racing, and when she climbed the stairs at school, that she was like out of breath.
After I started getting sick and we really started pressing them, saying we need to figure out what's wrong, they pretty much told us, do not come back.
She single-handedly changed the mindset of the whole crew because she could talk, Unlike Billy, can't explain his injuries. She went through exactly what happened to her.
Step by step, what happened to her, it started clicking in my brain, like, wait a minute, there's something really wrong here.
So here we had in front of us a young girl, beautiful young girl, in a wheelchair, talking about how she had this Gardasil HPV vaccine, and the images of her really affected all of us. Her story really did change a lot of our mindsets.
And by the end of that story, I was like, oh my God, I really don't know what's going on. There's something more to this.
At that point going forward, we were in for way more than we bargained for. We were about to have an education that you just couldn't buy. When we started out on the tour, we were full of ideas. We're going to have these lovely chairs and tables, and when we get an interview, we'll just sit outside the bus. But what happened very, very quickly is the lines got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the noise of people coming to see the bus, wanting to tell their story. And so we moved everything inside, and that became the iconic place for stories to be told.
Every day in our life was a party. Every single day they were holding hands and smiling and laughing and looking at each other, engaging in each other. And we brought them in at 9 months and 4 days to do, we were doing one vaccine at a time. On June 25th, 2007, we brought them in for the pneumococcal shot.
So just that shot?
One shot. My daughter still has the mark on her leg from the shot. She was the first one to get it, and she screamed and never really stopped screaming after that. But we continued, we didn't know. We did the boys as well. By noon, Claire shut completely off. Claire, our daughter, shut off first. It was as if she was blind and deaf and complete failure to thrive, from super happy, smiley girl to, this is a picture of her. She had full-blown eye contact. She was super lovely. Aww. And she shut right down. And all she did at that moment was stare at the ceiling fan. So that was at noon. We had the shot at 10 a.m. 2 o'clock, we watched Richie shut off. All his raspberry blowing and mama dada and the furniture walking and everything, they just shut off. All the giggles, all the smiles, again, failure to thrive. They lost all their reflexes. I'm an educational audiologist. I actually did the test for the stapedial reflex, which is a little muscle in the middle ear, just to see if a muscle they can't control was still working, and it didn't. The stapedial reflex dampens sound, so your ears don't hurt from a really loud sound, and both of them had no stapedial reflex. They stopped blinking, stopped yawning, stopped coughing, stopped sneezing. You could go towards their eyes and they wouldn't even phase, nothing would phase them. They lost their startle reflex. I threw a telephone book on the floor behind them, and no startle, nobody even looked to see what it was. So that was 2 o'clock. We watched Richie shut down, and I couldn't breathe. But here we go. The worst is when we saw the final one shut down. Robbie looked like he was hit by a bus. Robbie, from that moment on, had a stunned look on his face. If you asked or said his name, he still acted deaf and acted like he couldn't hear, although they did have normal hearing. I had it all tested. But he lost his happiness. This is a first year picture? First birthday.
3 months after the shot.
3 months after the shot. They were no longer engaged in anything or anyone. They lost their smiles. They just were in their own little separate worlds. They never held hands again. They never looked at each other again. Sorry.
In a week, I'm going to
My name is Nico LaHood. I'm a daddy, I'm a husband, I'm a former district attorney of Bexar County, and I'm a current private lawyer. The vaccine issue wasn't an issue with us. Davi, my wife, was from Mexico, so vaccines had the perception of doing something good. And for me, you don't question a doctor. And so our first 2 children followed the schedule, and so Maya was no different. We were excited to have our first child. She was vaccinated on day 1. Around her 6-month vaccines, she was following the schedule, and her body broke out in these hives. I mean, it was very alarming. First-time parents, we were scared out of our mind. We go to the doctor, and nobody told us it even could potentially be vaccines. We had no wisdom to ask to look at the insert. What was told to us, actually, and I can't even believe I'm saying this, was that Maya was allergic, hear me, to Davi's breast milk. And nobody gave us a medical reason, nobody gave us a medical explanation why our daughter broke out in hives immediately after her 6-month vaccines. Michael's characteristics were awesome, and we have video and picture of him making eye contact. He was responding to his name, smiling, pretending to read. You could keep his attention. He was goo-goo-gagging. Davi says it, I think, best when she said, man, this kid won't be quiet. I mean, he's going to talk. It's going to be a vocal kid. The irony of that statement is he's nonverbal. I've never had a conversation with my 9-year-old son. I will tell you for sure that he was not born on the spectrum of autism. He was engaging, he was responding, he was meeting his milestones until the 16-month to 18-month round of that MMR big dose of vaccines. In a negative way, we're trained not to ask questions, not to be litigators for our children. That's what I do for a living. I fight for people. I'm a legal bodyguard. And I had to deal with this for years, that I was not a good lawyer for my son. Every lawyer in America should be going absolutely apeshit over this issue. Think about what I'm going to tell you. No double-blind placebo study, meaning no safety studies. A crap load of injuries, no accountability. What lawyer would be okay with that? Even if you don't believe the claim that vaccines could be causing these injuries to our children, you can't be happy with that system. You can't. You know, I'm the one that looks at my son, and I can see him when he's having his meltdowns. I can see him trapped in the prism of autism. I can see him screaming and yelling at me and saying, Pop, how do I get out of here? What do I do to get out of here? I didn't do anything to get in here. Can you help me get out of here? We're the one that has to deal with that. And the one thing I will not tell my son is that I'm too much of a chicken shit to tell your story. That I promise you. That I'm too scared to tell your story, Michael. Since you can't talk for yourself, since someone's greed and deception took away your ability to tell your story, I'm gonna tell your story.
My son was healthy at birth. He was healthy.
So at 18 months, he had already had his measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, at which point the damage became so apparent that Zachy just completely disappeared. He just left. And we were left with the shell that we're still dealing with.
He had such a horrible bout of falls from his seizures that we were going to the emergency room so often. The doctor gave my husband a stapler and a staple remover to do it at home. I mean, is that better than a week of measles?
My son would have been a football player. And instead, he wears diapers. He uses a pacifier. He's nonverbal. He has extreme rages where I think he's in some kind of a pain, and no doctor will take him as a patient here in Las Vegas. I used to have a column, and I was looking for a doctor then, and I'm looking for a doctor still.
Because of his constant seizures and having to check on him, or if I hear him get up, I know to run in there before he falls against the wall.
Where's his room?
I sleep upstairs. My husband and I don't even get to sleep in the same room anymore. You know, living in a 2-story house, In the mornings, I'm pretty much trapped. I have to stay up there until I know he's up and about and, not going to have one, because he's had far too many seizures on our stairs. And, people say, oh, you should move to a one-story house. Well, yeah, that'd be great. Who's going to come renovate this house?
The one thing that really just breaks my heart and that we do cry about is who's gonna take care of her when we're gone. It's so stressful to think about,
He was hitting all of his milestones.
Oh, she was perfect. Adorable, sweet, beautiful, enjoyed being cuddled.
Started, talking and walking at an early age, doing everything, just excelled.
Had been saying dada, he had been pointing.
Ethan could look me in the eye before that and he could laugh.
Jamie was having fevers.
Really high fevers, so we started having
seizures. He's almost died on me several times.
It was violent vomiting.
He vomited.
Projectile vomiting. Diarrhea.
She was always crying.
No medical solutions.
Crying hysterically.
Screaming. This high-pitched scream that I'll never forget.
She stopped talking.
She completely shut down. Nonverbal.
Let me tell you what a day in our life is like. So you got, say, a 6 or 7 or 8 year old child who's not potty trained. And at 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, they fill their diaper. Well, you assume that's pretty uncomfortable, so they take it off. Pretty soon it's all over them. It's all over the bed. In short order, it's all over me. It's all over her. I'm snapping at her. She's snapping at me. We're both snapping at the kid, who is the only innocent party in the whole scenario. And the one thing that's conspicuously absent from that scenario is anybody who told you that shot was safe. They were all asleep in their bed.
What brought you out here today?
We're traveling around America in this RV bus, listening to the parents' stories of vaccine injury, and we are so tired of doctors telling us that vaccines are safe and effective, and people like myself who believe them now have a damaged child. So what we're doing is what the government and the paediatricians, the doctors, the medical profession should have done right from the beginning, and that's listen to the parents. So everything on this bus, all the stories, is from the people of America.
But when I look at the vaccine damage that I see, there's almost a pattern that goes like this. Damage as early as possible, damage as often as possible, deny the damage could possibly be anything other than a coincidence, denigrate the damaged when they point it out, describe the parents of damaged children as deluded or delusional, and then demonize those parents, and then divide society so that pro-vaccine then demonize parents who once were pro-vaccine but vaccinated their children who became damaged.
My name is Dr. Suzanne Humphreys. I am primarily educated with a BA in physics, and then I went on to medical school and studied internal medicine and specialized in nephrology. What made me realize there might be a problem with vaccines was one of my own patients telling me that they were fine until they had that vaccine. So I investigated and found out that his kidney function was perfectly normal before he was given a vaccine, and he was requiring dialysis within a month afterward. I just felt like I needed to know the truth, and if the truth was that vaccines were safe and effective in doing what they said, then I would have been a primary proponent for vaccines. I'd be marching to the drum of vaccination. I just needed to know, were vaccines actually causing problems in my patients or weren't they? I couldn't stop myself from researching after that because there was just so much evidence and there were so many things that I was discovering while I was looking into the safety of vaccination that really blew my mind. And in a kind of a morbid way, I found it fascinating because history was being rewritten in my brain from what I was programmed to believe.
So we were honoured to have Dr. Suzanne Humphreys come on the bus. All we ever hear is, Polly, you can't be doing what you're doing because you don't have a medical degree. And here is Dr. Suzanne with a medical degree, a great doctor, coming on the bus. Everything fits in place. We have the perfect team now.
There are so many more professionals out there that understand there's a problem and they want to know more. And they hear the stories from the bus or they read books here and there, and they feel that they can't go on the way they used to.
Yeah, what about the medical professionals, the nurses, the doctors who've come forward to tell their story, their realization that actually the parent's story was right all along?
My name is Lisa Rankin. I'm a family physician.
I'm Dr. Judy Mikovits.
My name is Dr. Patricia Ryan.
So I'm Paul Thomas.
I'm a professor of medicine at West Virginia University School of Medicine.
I'm Cornelia Franz.
And you are a pediatric doctor?
I am a pediatric doctor.
And how long have you been practicing as a pediatrician?
A really long time, over 30 years.
I'm Cami Benton.
Jane Orient. I'm an internist in Tucson, Arizona.
I'm Dr. Ramon Ramos. I'm a pediatrician here in Savannah, Georgia.
I'm an emergency room physician.
My name is James Neuenschwander. I'm a physician in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
My name is Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I've been researching problems associated with vaccines since September of 2000. I put well over 20,000 hours of my own time into researching these problems with vaccines.
Dr. Bob Zajac. I'm a board-certified pediatrician.
My name is Tetiana Buhanic. My qualifications, first of all, I'm a mom, and I believe that's my most important qualification, and I just happen to have a PhD in immunology in addition to that.
We couldn't believe the medical profession as they started to come to the bus.
It took a lot for those people to stand up and talk. I mean, they've seen what happens to doctors and scientists who've taken this issue on and who've been destroyed.
Doctors, nurses, people with the top of the top qualifications in the medical world.
And the story they've been told by their colleagues, by public health, by their pharmaceutical industry sponsored medical education was in fact a grand lie.
So when you first started out to be a doctor, what kind of training did you get on vaccines?
Honestly, I don't remember very much conversation at all.
We were just taught that they help prevent disease.
We were told on our rotations that vaccines were safe and effective. Here's a schedule.
We are not taught what's in those vaccines. We are just taught what the schedule is like.
Safe and effective, and they've saved millions of lives. We learned the schedule. We did not learn what was in them.
It was more philosophically vaccines than the science behind it, I guess, if you will.
As you know, medical doctors don't have a lot of training in vaccines.
If you are one of those people who knows more than doctors, that's fine, no vaccinations, but you're not allowed to go to the doctor anymore. Okay? Why would you even want to go to a doctor who knows less than you do?
It's amazing, but they didn't teach us very much.
Very little. Very little. And what you got basically was told, these are the things that you need to give to your patients.
It was just more about administration of the vaccines rather than the real effects and risks associated with them.
Here's the schedule. These are the saviors of mankind. They're safe, and you need to make sure everybody's vaccinated.
In the field of vaccines, everything is great, everything is safe and effective, everything has been determined. There is no need to go back and look at it again. Just like everybody else, I have to go to the insert and look what's in it. I don't know what they put in vaccines.
And so I kind of thought that they were saline water and like bits of viruses and it, you know, super safe.
Yeah, you learn about adjuvants and you learn about the immune system and how it works, but as far as what the vaccine actually does, and you never heard about the negative effect of a vaccine. Never.
Zero. None.
The whole argument of your doctor has done all this research. Well, if they've done it on their own, maybe.
Yeah. Well, since there was no discussion of there being anything bad about vaccines, and unless you spend some time on your own, you know, investigating, you have the presumption that vaccines are good and that everyone should get them and that you should make sure that every child coming into your office is getting them on schedule or they're going to have some horrible illness.
So there wasn't any training. There wasn't any looking at side effects. There wasn't any of that. So nothing.
Would an immunologist be probably, of all the medical professions, someone that is near to being an expert?
I would say no one is an expert in vaccines, absolutely no
Parents
one.
Are, by the way.
Yes, because no one is being taught about vaccines in schools. And so basically in vaccine field, You really have to be a self-taught expert.
If doctors don't know about vaccines because they've had no training, then who are you going to trust? You have to trust the parents. You have to listen to the parents.
This is amazing. What are you going to do with this bus when you're done?
Well, whatever happens, the parents are going to take back their freedom. That's right. Parents are now in control.
Yes.
The right people.
That's right.
See all those hearts? See those right there? Yeah. They are all for you.
All for me?
All of those hearts. Look at all the different colours coming up now.
The colours are coming up.
Every single one of those is for you.
Cool, isn't it?
Yeah, that's how much people love you.
They love me too.
They really do.
Yeah, baby, people love you. They love you a lot.
I predict that Gardasil will become the greatest medical scandal of all times, because at some point in time, the evidence will add up to prove that this vaccine has absolutely no effect on cervical cancer, and that the very many adverse effects which destroy lives and even kill serve no other purpose than to generate profit for the manufacturers. Former Merck physician.
What I understood about human papillomavirus is that it's an infection that comes and goes. And it's been around for a long time, and it's in many animals, including lizards and primates. It's not just in humans, that babies are born with it. So I was really surprised that here's this virus that's been around and so prevalent, and it's being blamed on giving cancers to people. And then what I found out was that those cancers are not necessarily solely attributed to this virus, but yet this virus was being targeted by a vaccine.
There's so many brilliant interviews that were done during the VAXXED tour. But I will say that one of the memories that really stands out to me is the moment we pulled into Utah and Polly interviewed Colton Barrett and his mother.
So tell us what happened here.
Well, Colton was a 13-year-old healthy, strong boy. He loved baseball, motorcycles, anything that has to do with an adrenaline rush. He was going to go to scout camp. For scout camp, you have to have a physical, so we went to the doctor's office, and the doctor said, hey, he's the age that you should get the HPV vaccine. I said, okay, how come? Well, it can help prevent cancer, and even if he's not promiscuous, he can still give it to his wife when he gets married. I said, oh, well, that sounds like a pretty good thing then. So he was administered the vaccine, and on the third round, 2 weeks after, he started having a really bad neck ache. The next day, he went motorcycle riding with his dad, and that day he came home, he was pale, starting to feel nauseous, really sore neck. He didn't feel good. He went to bed, and the next day I checked on him. He still didn't want to get out of bed. I just thought, man, you're just really weak and exhausted. And that evening, when he sat up to take a drink of water, he said, Mom, can you give that to me in my left hand? I can't use my right arm very good. It's weak. And he tried to lift up, and all of a sudden he just flopped back, and his head just hit the pillow, and I went, do you have spinal meningitis? You know, it was my first, really bad fear. So my husband took him in to Instacare Monday morning, February 17th, 2014, holding his head for him because he couldn't get out of bed. The paralysis just went down, down, down after the first 4 to 5 days, where he was completely paralyzed from the neck down, had no movement at all. Colton, give me your eyebrows. You were doing them better than that the other night. There you go. Show me yes.
Show me yes. Show me no.
Yeah.
But you have to have this breathing apparatus with you the whole time.
Yeah, it's about 15 pounds, so I always have to have someone with me to carry it, to get around.
It's a literal ball and chain for him.
And the whole time, watching this box on his side with this hose going to his throat, breathing for him to, and then he could speak, waiting for that breath to come from that box. And it was a realization that changed my life forever. I remember staring at this and watching this interview go on and watching this box and thinking, we say we got rid of the iron lung.
His right arm is completely paralyzed. His left arm only has minimal function now. And he's lucky he's regained his legs and his core strength.
So the people who gave you this vaccine, where are they now? What do they say?
Our doctor is actually, he's the doctor that delivered him. He's just a family practice doctor. I still like him. I am upset that he still wants to give the vaccine, but you know, he will not give it to boys anymore. He's cautioning on girls to give it to girls, but.
So he's not going to give the HPV vaccine to boys?
Correct.
Colton, do you just realize how many boys that you've just saved?
It's good he's at least not doing it to boys, but lots of girls can still get hurt.
All right, so let's start by talking about your life before Gardasil.
I was more artistic. I wasn't into sports, although I did like to go jogging, do exercises whenever the weather was nice. Let's see.
Yeah, I was a competitive club soccer player. I was trying out for ODP, which is like playing for the state and stuff.
Soccer.
Yes.
Yeah.
She played year round, and on top of that, right around that time, she was running track, the 400, 800, and long jump. Prior to the Gardasil shot, Corinne was academic excellence. You know, she always great grades.
I was athletic, straight A's in school, really no health issues before. And
what sport did you play?
Volleyball.
You were a volleyball?
Big volleyball player.
Basketball was my favorite. I played that from kindergarten up to my senior year of high school. And then I would play softball and volleyball.
Top honors in her high school, graduated top in her class. Top of that, she was a head cheerleader for 3 years, captain of the cheerleaders, won a national competition.
I did karate. I was almost a black belt. I could take down a 40-year-old black belt who used to spar with me.
We got the shots. She was accepted that summer into a high ballet school at the University of Irvine and could not dance.
Ballet, tap, jazz, hip-hop. Pretty much everything I could possibly do, I did.
I mean, she was doing really well in school, and she was really popular, and she actually had auditioned with Disney, and they wanted to fly her out to California, and she had a very promising future.
Yeah, I was really active. I started going to the gym with her probably age like 13.
4 or 5 times a week,
Yeah.
Played volleyball.
So sleeping for a couple of days was out of character?
Completely.
She was playing basketball, she was doing track. She made varsity wrestling her freshman year and had a grip of friends. And her freshman year, that's when she got that HPV vaccine and everything changed for her. She was a straight A student. Everything she was doing was for scholarships. She was college bound. That's where she was going. And this destroyed that for her.
I had never seen a vaccine cause so much devastation as I had with the HPV vaccines.
The Gardasil vaccine is among the most injurious of any vaccination that's ever been manufactured in the United States.
Be it anecdotal or not, way too many cases and complaints of having neurological insults soon after that vaccine is given, even with the first dose.
Gardasil is probably the single worst mass vaccine that we've ever seen.
So what we were seeing was these really high-functioning teenagers ending up in wheelchairs, and some of them actually ending up dying or killing themselves. And I don't think you can ever justify that for an infection that comes and goes, that causes very little disease in and of itself, and something where pap smears were doing such a good job, it really just didn't make any sense to me.
This vaccine targets millions of preteens and teens for whom the risk of dying from cervical cancer is 0.
They started talking to me about get my HPV shot, and I turned them down about 1 or 2 times.
This doctor sat down and badgered us for 45 minutes.
They started showing me photos and saying that I'm gonna get this and that I need to take this shot.
Photos of what?
Photos of cervical cancer and just what it will happen if you don't get the shot, blisters and different things, and it scared me. I was scared. I didn't want that.
Every single time I went in, she was like practically shoving it down my throat.
The doctor literally scared me into taking this vaccine. I had said no twice before because it was too new.
You know, nobody in their right mind would ever take this vaccine if they actually read the clinical literature.
She pushed my buttons just enough, trying to make me feel like a bad mother if I didn't give Caitlin the shot. You know, do you want your daughter to get cervical cancer? Who wants their child to get cancer?
You need to get this vaccine. What's going to happen when you get cervical cancer and die?
Well, cancer is a scary word, so of course I started to listen.
Oh wow, oh my gosh, sign me up. I don't ever want to have cancer.
I was just afraid of the word cancer, so I thought, oh my god, I have to go get this, it's free.
You know, I was young, I didn't know anything about this, so I just was like, okay, and just agreed to it.
The death rates in the Gardasil trials were 37 times the death rates for cervical cancer. Children who take that vaccine, the Gardasil vaccine, are 37 times more likely to die from the vaccine than they are to die from cervical cancer.
I really wasn't educated about Gardasil at the time, so I allowed the vaccination. The biggest mistake of my life.
So I go and get the first shot, and from what I was told by my doctor, I immediately went into a seizure. I was on the floor seizing, and then I just passed out cold.
So she had a baseline physical, but it was also the same day she got her second vaccination of Gardasil. The doctor detected a heart arrhythmia. In all of her 20 years, there had never been any heart arrhythmia. She never had any symptoms or any indication of any difficulty. No one in the family ever had a heart problem. So we were really surprised.
I started having severe leg pain. I couldn't move. I couldn't get up out of bed.
Could not move my arms. My leg joints would feel like my leg was about to come out, and it would be in like excruciating pain.
Moments where I couldn't move my legs.
She just matter of factly says, I can't walk. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, my legs don't work.
Her legs in particular hurt really, really bad. Her hips and her knee joints were very, very painful. It would be like feeling paralyzed. Sometimes it was one leg, sometimes it was both legs.
And that was it. He never regained his ability to fully walk. We would go out, he would walk very, very little, and I would see his legs just start to collapse like an accordion.
She had lost the ability to walk. She couldn't see very well. Her vision was doubled and blurred. She couldn't read anymore. She began to regress. She became like a 9-year-old child.
They gave me my shots in my left thigh, and the last one hurt really bad. It felt like they were injecting fire in my leg.
She got the third shot. Within 2 weeks, she was hospitalized, and she remained hospitalized for 8 solid months.
She's been hospitalized 9 times in 26 months.
Hospitalized for what?
For extreme pain that is uncontrollable.
Where is your pain when you have it?
Absolutely everywhere.
Her first major symptom was excruciating head pain. Like the worst migraine you could ever have times 10.
My joints, my spine, my head especially.
She became light sensitive. She became sound sensitive. She had to be in a dark room.
Really, really bad migraines. and dizzy spells and fatigue that was so severe that she couldn't even get out of bed that day.
Headaches. At first they started off slow, and then I started to get them like every day, and they would start in the back and work their way forward, very intense and distracting, like I couldn't really think straight. I got my period for the first time, and then it went away forever, like it never came back.
So she was diagnosed with a very rare disease called post-histoplasmosis fibrosing mediastinitis. In her right mediastinum, she has a 10-centimeter tissue mass. It's inoperable.
She has this, I'm sorry, Jeff.
We're just hoping it won't grow. We don't know. I mean, we're taking it day by day. It's by all her vitals, so they cannot do any operations to try to take it out.
She came down with pneumonia, bronchitis, 2 ear infections, a sinus infection, a throat infection, and constant thrush.
So much pain, right, even now. And you know, I just wish someone would reach in my back and rip out my spine. I cannot take this anymore.
This is an NJ2.
What it does is basically it goes up my nose and down my throat, and it goes past my stomach into my jejunum, or the first part of the small intestine, because my stomach is completely paralyzed.
Your stomach is paralyzed?
Yes.
The NGT wouldn't work, and we had to be put on a port for nutrition, which she was on for 3 years.
3 years.
The child never ate a meal for 3 years. And if that wasn't bad enough, if she had suffered enough pain, then she had this excruciating long bone pain in her legs. And we would have to ice her legs down to give her relief. And she was miserable. She was just miserable. And she would say to me, she'd say, I want to go home. And she'd be in this house and she would say, I want to go home. And she was talking about to be with the Lord.
I went in for a gynecologist appointment, got a pap smear, and they told me it came back abnormal. And I immediately started freaking out because I've never had one abnormal.
Very few doctors have ever heard of it. Nobody knows how to treat it. Anything they prescribe, she's a guinea pig. She's the initial guinea pig. So they put her on an immunosuppressant and itraconazole, which is an antifungal medication. I'll dump some of them out. This is what it looks like to be on Gardasil. The aftermath of it. And this is just one bag. We got about 15 more at home.
I said, okay. I said, so what does that mean about the abnormal cells? And she said, well, they're precancerous. And I said, cancerous for what? And she said, cervical cancer.
So we have to worry the rest of her life if the inflammation in her body is going to make that mass grow again.
I should have never got those shots because in my mind, I knew that they were what gave me HPV.
So the problem with Gardasil, like most vaccines, is it was never tested against a true placebo, an inert placebo. And the CDC and HHS say, if you don't test it against a true placebo, it's not science.
A placebo is just an inert substance that doesn't cause any damage, that they give one group of individuals in a particular clinical study, and then they give the drug. That's the experimental group. They give that to another set of individuals. The people that were supposed to be the control group, they got aluminum. And when they did that, out of every 100 patients, they had at least 2 severe autoimmune events.
You have no way of gauging whether the injuries you're seeing from the product are being caused by that product or whether they're just bad, sad coincidences.
The CDC knew about this. Merck, the manufacturer of the Gardasil vaccine, knew about this. It's as plain as the nose on your face. All you have to do is look at the clinical trial data.
The entity that is actually performing the study and paying for the study is Merck. So Merck got to decide which injuries were being caused by Gardasil and which were just bad coincidences. And because it had that power, it just wrote them all off as bad coincidences. You can do that when there's no placebo, because the injuries they were seeing in the control group, where the girls were getting aluminum neurotoxins, were identical to the injuries they were getting in the Gardasil group. So they said, well, we don't have to report any of these as vaccine injuries. how they were able to license something that is insanely dangerous.
After all the struggles and fights, and we thought she was finally getting a little better, she went to sleep. She wasn't feeling good during the day, and I went in to check on her, and she looked like she was very still. She was in her bed, and she had passed away, and I tried to revive her, but she was gone. I loved her so much. I would have given my life for her. She was just a good kid, and her mom made a bad choice.
The last hug I gave her, I was standing on the step hugging her, and I wanted her to stay longer. And she said, "No, Mom, I want to get back to school." Okay, I'll see you in a couple weeks. But in the interim, the police came to our door one night. So I said to them, "Is this about my daughter?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Was she in an accident?" They said, "No." They said they found her dead in her bed at school, and that they didn't know what happened. And so, I don't know if anyone's ever had somebody
I think if there was one vaccine that should be eliminated out of the schedule immediately, and there would be absolutely no ramifications, no problems with diseases cropping up and people dying, that vaccine has to go.
So tell us from your point of view.
Well, it does suck, like, not being able to play sports anymore. Because I did do a lot of sports, and it was my favorite.
You're an awesome sportsman, we've just seen photos of you.
Yeah, I have to sit on the sideline, just watch everybody. But getting used to it, so it's not as bad anymore.
The one thing about Colton is he does always smile, and he's an awesome kid that way. He doesn't complain. You're good, huh?
Yeah, good.
We're doing this broadcast in memory of these babies who have passed away. And so as we travelled on and on and on, we then met parents who would tell us that they would vaccinate their babies and then their babies would die.
I walked up to kiss him goodnight. It was 12:06 in the morning, and I kissed his cheek, and it was like an ice cube. And I just started screaming to Bryce, "He's dead, he's dead." And everything that I know how to do CPR. I'm certified in this. I just stepped back and screamed. And Bryce walked in and just grabbed him and ran.
I grabbed him, I get in the car, I'm trying to do CPR while I'm driving, and it's raining. And I just pulled up to the emergency room, and Brandon said that he's dead. And they started working on him. Epinephrine, they gave him all these shots, and his body was just swelling from all the medicine they were trying to give him to get him going again. There was never anything again.
Where's Mason? Pew! Where's Mason? Pew! Where's Mason? Pew!
The infant mortality rate study that was conducted by the Centers for Disease Control in 2014, and they looked at the incidence of infant mortality in 34 developed nations, and the United States placed last. We were 34th out of all of these developed nations. We give the most vaccines during the first year of life.
He got his Hep B, he got his vitamin K.
At 2 months, and I think at 4 months, and then at 6 months.
She had the Hep B, and she had the vitamin K injection.
He got his hepatitis B,
Rototec,
polio,
Prevnar.
1 in each leg, 1 on the arm, and 1 oral.
Rotavirus, which was oral.
The DTaP.
DTaP. Well, when we went to get him vaccinated, he had just been hospitalized for RSV. And when we went in, I said, I don't feel comfortable with him being vaccinated because he's just been so sick. I think that we need to wait. And the pediatrician looked at Bryce and I and said, if you don't vaccinate your son, who was born at 35 weeks and is a premature baby, you're signing his death certificate for this whooping cough.
Well, that's when the doctor told me he was going to go ahead and vaccinate her, being she was there. And I did ask him, because it was 2 weeks early, if it was okay. He said, yeah, it would be no problem.
This is the day that she had the vaccines. This is before we left to go to the doctor.
So we were just about to go?
Yeah, and this is her the very next day where she started running the high fevers. I mean, we could see there was something not right.
I never second guessed it that I shouldn't vaccinate them. But at that appointment that morning, as I was laying him on the table to get him vaccinated,
As the nurse is going to stick the needle in his right thigh, just something screamed in me, no, don't, wait. But at that point, the moment had passed. He's just not sleeping. I can't do anything to make him happy.
When she wasn't sleeping, she was very irritable.
If she wasn't crying, she was real lethargic.
We used to do this thing where we would cradle her in our arms, and then we'd lift her little arm up and we'd eat her ribs. And she loved it, but she didn't love that anymore. She cried and screamed.
He started screaming 23 hours a day.
He was so dazed, he wasn't there.
He just kind of looked at the ceiling, and anytime you tried to get in his way, he would just look around you.
And they told me she had a little cold. Just a cold.
So I gave her the smallest dose of Tylenol, which is what the doctor told me to do, and I put her to bed.
and then as I left for my shift, I went and gave him a kiss, and I just remember the look on his face. He was just so sad, and he doesn't get sad because he was with his dad. His dad was with him, he was with his sister, he could play with her, but it was almost like I was leaving him for the last time, and he knew it.
Good Friday, 2 days before Easter, she passed away in her sleep.
That was the last time I kissed his alive, warm cheek. It was the last time that I held him. It was the last time that I told him that I loved him when he was alive.
Well, I went to go lay him down, and I went to load the dishwasher, and when I went to go check on him, he was already gone. I remember holding him like this, and his head was just drooping, and his arms were just limp, like he was already gone.
I left her just to take the trash out and came back and she was arched back and not breathing. I started CPR. I called for my husband. He came and continued. When the first responders came, the first person I saw was someone I'd grown up with. And he came running down the driveway, and I thought, oh, good, like he'll make sure that she's fine, you know. So they came in and couldn't get her breathing. And when I heard them call for the second EpiPen, I knew that she wasn't going to respond.
Couldn't save her.
That he finally called her time of death. It was on July 4th, 2015 at 7:01 a.m.
They let us go in there where she was, and I held her and I held her and I just prayed for her to start breathing.
She's been through a lot. She lost her innocence that night, as we had to tell her in the ER to say goodbye to Kobe, because he's going to live with Jesus. and he won't see him again. And the sparkle just left her eye. You could see it. She was happy. She didn't understand that she was losing her best friend that night.
Brave girl. And you will see your brother again.
We leave the hospital, we get home with my parents trying to talk about funeral arrangements, and cops come knock on my door.
The police wouldn't let us go home without them. They had to escort us home.
Child Protective Services, whenever something like this happens, they're automatically there.
What are y'all trying to say? Are y'all trying to say I did something to my baby?
They took our son's crib and mattress out of the house.
They took pictures and took her dose of Tylenol that I gave her, took her last feeding that she had.
Looked in every cabinet, woke up our other kids, asked them questions.
They treated us like we did it, like we killed her. And that hurt.
They couldn't find nothing, and they labeled it SIDS.
You know, these infants don't need to be dying like this. The diseases are not coming at them at such a rate that we had to protect them at all cost with a vaccine.
You know, when people tell me vaccines are making children healthier, really, I look at the hepatitis B vaccine.
Hepatitis B for a newborn whose mother doesn't have Hep B makes no sense.
It drives me insane. Why is that a vaccine for young children?
There's just no reason whatsoever that a newborn, a 1 month old or 6 month old should be vaccinated against a disease that is basically sexually transmitted.
So then I asked, well, how long does the hepatitis B vaccine last? And he said, well, we hope it lasts about 12 years. So I'm just saying, you know, this just does not make sense.
This has actually been proven that these vaccines cause cardiovascular instability in these infants. And so all that aluminum that you've just given in these killed bacterial or viral vaccines is having a profound inflammatory effect that's killing them.
You look at the packet insert, you even look at the literature of the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. They compensate for death due to encephalopathy and encephalitis. It causes death, and they admit it.
Because you don't vaccinate in the first year.
Right.
Do any of you, have you had any SIDS?
No.
Bam.
Wow.
The second Mason was vaccinated, his life changed and ended. And with Oliver, who is our son that was born 2 years later, he actually got whooping cough.
And he's still here today.
Right.
Whoever knew that you could die from a vaccine? I had no idea you could die from a vaccine. There was death everywhere. The dead babies, the toddlers, the young children, the teenagers, the adults, the old age people. Every day we would have a death story in every location.
I found it really difficult to be on the bus and even listening to the stories.
We were utterly mentally exhausted and our hearts were breaking and we felt like our souls were being ripped from us listening to the utter devastation.
I actually had to tune out some of it because my heart couldn't hold all of it. It was just too difficult to carry these stories around in my head and my heart.
This is our memorial to those who have been unseen and unheard.
Public health emergency is in effect in New York City this morning in response to the rapidly growing measles outbreak.
Measles outbreaks are rattling regions of the country again this year.
I've studied measles since 1990 intensively. It's a fascinating subject. And measles was becoming a dramatically milder disease in a very, very short space of time. During the 1920s, it was a major killer of children, 1,200 per million during epidemics, and that fell precipitously beyond that point, to the point where in the single vaccine was introduced, there'd been a 99.96% reduction in case fatality rate. It was becoming dramatically milder. That was natural herd immunity, and it worked extremely well. And what natural herd immunity did was to constrain the age of infection to childhood, when measles is a mild disease. And that worked in two ways. One, exposure to measles as a child led to lifelong immunity. So you didn't get it when you were an adult, when measles is a more severe disease. So exposure protected you. And the second part of it is that mothers who'd had natural measles gave very, very good transplacental immunity to their fetus, their growing fetus, and through breastfeeding to their babies. So babies were protected against measles during the first year of life.
The measles vaccine has diminished the number of measles cases in this country, okay? Nobody can deny that. The problem is that it's skewed the immunity in the population into a place where the most vulnerable are now not protected.
So what has vaccination done? Firstly, it doesn't work, so it doesn't produce immunity for life. The vaccine fails, and you become susceptible to measles again when you're more vulnerable to a severe infection as an adult. The second end of the infants, mothers who've had measles vaccine don't give good immunity to their babies. So babies are no longer protected during the first year of life. So vaccination has in fact destroyed natural herd immunity.
If we were to stop vaccinating today for measles, what we would have is a resurgence of measles. Most people would get it and be fine and recover from it, even adults. People think you're going to die if you get measles as an adult. You're not. But if you had more circulating virus in the population, then those newborn babies, which were formerly protected by their mothers, are now susceptible. So we've really been put in a pickle by this vaccine program.
It's also led to renewed concerns about pockets of unvaccinated children there and across the country.
An unvaccinated community is an at-risk community. It places all of us at risk.
The idea that these children are somehow a threat to the vaccinated. Well, if the vaccines work, they wouldn't be a threat at all, but of course they don't work. So that's one problem that public health has.
The aim is to force everybody to be vaccinated. And the primary reason for that is to get rid of the unvaccinated control group so that nobody can see how healthy unvaccinated children are in comparison with vaccinated children.
They're not a source of infection. They're the healthiest children you could ever meet. So this whole notion, as I've said, of herd immunity, of community immunity, whatever that means, is based upon a complete fabrication. It's a lie.
Do we blame the anti-vax movement for that?
Well, yes. Unfortunately, these outbreaks are due to the anti-vaccine movement.
Our media is trying to make people hate unvaccinated families, unvaccinated children, making you terrified of the measles. And the reason the measles is spreading is those people that aren't using the vaccines. But what's scary is the language to hate children, to hate people, to say that they are putting us all at risk.
We have had multi-generational indoctrination with fear because people don't understand that measles is a fever, a cough, a rash, and maybe some diarrhea in the vast majority of people. And autism really is a disease because it is something that's permanent, life-changing, and lasts a really long time. So would you rather have a cold or a flu, or would you rather have a lifelong travesty because you're so afraid of getting an infection?
A child of mine was healthy, strong, and full of life before vaccination, but very shortly afterwards it became dull and pale, and soon sickness made its appearance. It just escaped death. I believe, sir, we can go so far as to say children that have been vaccinated can be picked out from those who are not. A parent, December 31st, 1894.
You've never met a parent who regretted not vaccinating, but you meet hundreds and thousands who do.
So we took a break after the first leg and we all had time to reflect on what had just happened with this amazing amount of people turning up to tell their stories. And that's when we suddenly realised the unvaccinated people are there for a reason. We need to start the second leg interviewing them as well.
They're not doing vaccinated versus unvaccinated studies because they're frightened of the results. If you did a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study, we know what's going to happen. The entire vaccine program would come into question.
They won't do the vax study. We, the people, are going to go out there and see for ourselves. What are the unvaccinated like? We know what the injured are like. Let's now look into the world of the unvaccinated.
Look at all these unvaccinated children that are alive. Extraordinary.
Hi, guys.
All right, so is there anybody here that's had a vaccination? Mommy and Daddy have had a vaccine, but none of you children, not one.
I mean, they have amazing immune systems. When they get sick, we get over it in one day.
Both of my kids are really, really healthy.
Health-wise, she's insanely healthy. I mean, she never gets sick.
They're both insanely intelligent.
Their health is ridiculous.
And they recover fast from things.
My kids are super healthy.
They are very healthy kids. They have traveled to many places. My kids have gone to Nicaragua. You can't get more third world country than that, trust me.
With no vaccines.
With no vaccines.
I have super healthy, great, unvaccinated kids.
How is all your health?
Well, we're all healthy, and I've never been to a doctor for any reason except a broken arm and a neuromuscular injury.
I have 3 grown children.
They're all grown up. And did you vaccinate your children?
No, I did not. They're all completely unvaccinated. I can probably count on one hand how many times they've had to go to the doctor in their entire life.
I have 15 or 16, I can't keep track, 15 or 16 nieces and nephews, and none of them have received vaccines, and they're all very healthy kids as well.
10 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren, 5th one on the way who will not be vaccinated either. They're all extremely healthy.
They're all so healthy. It's like they don't have asthma. It's like they're not sick all the time. They get a cold and they get over it.
Every time we've been in a situation where my kids have the same thing that the kid next door has, their symptoms are night and day. They fare so much better and heal so much quicker.
I've probably been sick once this year, and it was just a cold. I had a stuffy nose, and it lasted for like 2 days.
Even his friends who are partially vaccinated are sicker in general. My kid has missed like maybe a handful of days from kindergarten to 6th grade. My other friend who has a daughter who's also unvaccinated, I saw her at school, and so I kind of whispered to her, I'm like, so how many days of school has your child missed? And she went, and I said, mine too.
It was so blatant that these children were super, super healthy.
I had never seen health like that. I didn't know that health like that was even possible. Not needing antibiotics in one's entire life.
I've never had an antibiotic in my life.
48.
48 years old, never had an antibiotic, ever.
He's 16 years old, no allergies, no rashes, no ear infection, no colic, no antibiotics.
She's never had an over-the-counter medication, not once.
Neither one has ever had a shot, Tylenol, aspirin, antibiotic.
No antibiotic.
Neither of them, apart from that, have had any antibiotics or any meds.
She has never had an antibiotic.
My daughter had an infected toe, and she had antibiotics once for that, but that's been it.
People that I know that do vaccinate, I know their kids have more, seems to me, more health problems. I mean, my kids don't really have any, like definitely no chronic health problems. They've never been on pharmaceuticals. They've never needed You know, they've gone to the doctor for broken bones, which is why it's one thing I like doctors for.
The totally unvaccinated kids are always the most healthy ones. So my daughter also had like 3 ear infections before she was 6 months old. After that 6-month appointment and we stopped, she hasn't had one since then.
Nothing. She was perfectly healthy. Robust health. Yeah. She's never had an ear infection. Neither of them have, actually.
What about ear infections?
No.
Because you're 14, you must have had at least one ear infection in your life.
No.
My daughter is now 12 and has never had one single ear infection.
Ear infections?
No, none of my kids have had ear infections at all.
Whatever.
No, none of them.
See the number of children in these unvaccinated populations that have never even had an ear infection. I mean, I can't imagine that. My son was a walking ear infection. All we did was toss antibiotics down his throat in order to keep the ear infections at bay. And now you have these children who are unvaccinated, and the significant, large proportion of them have never seen an ear infection. That is just nigh into incredible.
I mean, our expectation was that these children were going to be constantly sick, that their immune systems were just not supported. The reality was completely the opposite of that.
You have no vaccine at all? Never. I'm in my 60s. I've never been vaccinated for anything.
Anything at all?
No, and then I had 2 kids that are now 28 and 30, and they were never vaccinated.
This is Palmer, he's 6. He's been sick maybe 4 days his entire life.
Never had any mumps, measles, chickenpox, eczema, asthma, ear infections, ADD, ADHD,
no ma'am.
Autism, ADD, ADHD, peanut allergy. Does he have eczema, allergies, ear infections?
Just big, strong muscles. And a really smart brain.
I could see the difference in kids. I used to be a kindergarten teacher, so I know what kids, you know, should look like and what they are looking like today. Both of my boys were reading by the age of 4.
My family thinks it's like voodoo, like we're crazy people, and you know, how could you not vaccinate? But then every time they see our kids, they're like, it's unbelievable how healthy they are.
They just seem so ahead of the curve. By 18 months, she's singing songs, she can have conversation.
He's a very bright boy. He's 3 years old and he's learning Mandarin. He knows Spanish, he knows English, he's a bilingual child.
Sign language.
He knows sign language. He's a very bright child.
She does sign language, she speaks Spanish.
Yes, teach him Spanish. 2, yep.
Speaking 3 languages.
Yep. So he's English, Spanish, and sign language.
They're very smart, and it's actually a challenge to challenge them with reading and math, and they're beyond their level.
They're all highly intelligent, bright-eyed, healthy children.
He's 3 months old and he is so strong.
He's super strong.
Hi.
He's super healthy. He's happy, smiling all the
Where's
time.
Polly?
I can't get over this 4-month child is like basically standing up. I'm just supporting her.
Do it over there, guys.
She is alert. She's so strong. This is the best therapy ever. Grab an unvaccinated baby and cuddle it.
Sorry.
It's perfect. Guys, you know, I'm sorry to report to you, it's the truth. It's what we're seeing out here. We're not making this up. This is the people of America reporting to us their children that are vaccinated and injured, and their children that are unvaccinated and perfectly fine. Everything suddenly became lighter. The minute we invited the unvaccinated into our lives, everything went up like that. So you could do a Sid story, which broke our hearts, and then in would come an unvaccinated family. And it was not long before we could see that their story is the same over and over and over again. Just like the vaccine injured, it's the same over and over again.
Doing this for 15 years now, I'll share with you that the vaccinated kids are the sickest. The partially vaccinated kids are not as sick, then the unvaccinated kids are the healthiest.
I've been in practice long enough that I can actually tell you that the unvaxxed kids are healthier. But I can also tell you that if the unvaxxed kids are a problem, then according to what's out there should be a lot of hospital admissions for my unvaxxed kids getting those things. And I'm seeing the opposite.
The most interesting stories that we did were the first child was injured, or maybe the second, and they go on to have more children and decide not to vaccinate because of the horrors of what's happened. And the difference between their unvaccinated child, same parents, same everything, is that that unvaccinated child is 100% healthy.
Yeah, I have quite a few patients in my practice who have 2 children, and those are great controls because most of them didn't figure out right away, so their child got some vaccines, but they all stopped it fairly early on, and there's a huge difference between the 2 children and the level of how they were affected. But I mean, if you start looking and pulling in all those people who have that same experience, I think you're going to see the same thing across the board. The level of that second child and how they're affected is going to be much less, if at all, compared to the first child who was completely vaccinated.
Now, did you work this out in time for your next child?
Oh yeah, she's not vaccinated.
At all?
Absolutely not.
Not vitamin K, nothing. I know it's not vaccination, but nothing.
Nothing.
So how is she?
Fantastic. She is she's completely typical, beautiful, smart, caring for her brother. She's been on 1 antibiotic her whole life. She's a picture of health.
So your other 4 children have no vaccines?
No.
At all?
None.
Wow.
No.
And I better, how you describe them?
Great.
Compared to the vaccinated child?
They're much healthier than the oldest one. They fight disease faster.
My 4 unvaxxed kids are far healthier than my vaccinated child. She, when she gets sicker than the rest of them, and more often than the rest of them. She's down for longer than the rest of them. Whether that's vaccine related or not, I don't know, but it seems to be an awful coincidence.
I was in the ER with my oldest all the time, and these 2 are never sick. And my boys were little. We also had a lot of asthma and breathing treatments and antibiotics over and over and over. No ear infections, but all of those other things.
And these girls don't get what
and
your
these
other
girls,
boys do?
no.
She's never needed anything, and she's 2 years old. By this time, this child had already been at the hospital. He had, had dozens of antibiotics.
Lucas is the only one that's completely unvaxxed. And it's interesting, he's our healthiest child. He has never been sick, never even so much as had a cold.
She's always the last one to get sick and the first one to get better.
His left ear, it was so significant, they actually had to kind of rebuild his eardrum from it. And that's, to me, that's one of the stark contrasts I see is our 13-month-old has had not a single ear infection.
Riley has had none. So Caden gets strep throat about 3 times a year. He also has allergies and ADHD. But we still love you. You're still very smart. So don't worry. Riley has been sick once.
My first is the sickest child that I have. She'll get sick. She'll be sick the longest. She'll be sick the hardest, actually. I mean, I guess she'll feel the worst pain or the most symptoms. Then my other 3, they'll be sick maybe a day and less than 24 hours and they're done and they're fine. Their body really knows how to fight whatever disease they come in contact with.
He is compensated through the vaccine injury compensation program.
My oldest 3 suffer with eczema, suffer with allergies, constipation, and they're the first ones to get sick.
The only time he's gone to doctor for checkups is because he's asked to go and wanted to see what it was like to go to the doctor's office.
You wanted to go to see a doctor? Okay, yeah, right.
So, well, because Keenan has to go so often, and so he wanted to see what it was like to go.
Do your unvaccinated children have all the injuries that we see so commonly in the vaccinated? Do they have the ear infections and the antibiotics and the eczema, asthma, allergies?
None.
Nothing?
No.
So the results of your study is the unvaxxed are supersonic healthy and the vaxxed are not.
Yes, right.
So the conclusion of the unvaxxed studies in your house is what?
That the unvaxxed kids are far healthier.
I don't worry about measles. I don't worry about polio. I don't worry about these things with her because she has a strong immune system. I worry about it with my son who is fully vaccinated because he would not be able to survive any of that, even though he was vaccinated for it.
It hurts me to watch the development, honestly, of my son, because I see what my daughter could have done. And I feel an immense guilt for vaccinating her.
So in our scenario, we've got, a control
for a lot of different variables. Same genetics, same mother and father, same environment, all 3 children. And the key discriminator that makes these children different is the presence or degree to which they're vaccinated.
Have a look at these vaccinated, unvaccinated families, which are controlled for genetics, they're controlled for their food intake, their environment, and everything else, and consistently we're seeing the unvaccinated, never vaccinated children are far healthier.
So we have here, ear infections, antibiotics, high-pitched scream from the vaccinated, unvaccinated, none of the above. And that became probably the most exciting revelation of the whole tour.
Now that I've seen so much of it and seen so many vaccinated and unvaccinated family members with the same thread, it's undeniable that an unvaccinated child's immune system is going to be that much more functional, that their brains actually function better. And when you understand how vaccines work and what the components of vaccines, including aluminum and all of the inflammation, do to anybody, no matter what your age, it makes complete sense that in the long run, that child's going to be much more functional and much healthier and able to do battle against any disease that comes along, the majority of which have no matching vaccine.
When you get out into the population and you start to meet people who, because they've heard of our stories, have not vaccinated their children, and you see these wonderful, healthy, happy, robust children, then it just makes all the difference in the world.
And these are the children that actually now we need to protect above all others, not force them to be vaccinated by rule of law, but to protect them, because they're going to be looking after the damaged children in the future.
There's no question about what we saw. What we all collectively saw was the same thing. Health, health, health with the unvaccinated, injury, injury, injury with the vaccinated. Same story.
That doesn't mean they're never going to get anything. You know, the only thing it says to me, my kids are vaccine free, my kids will never, ever, ever be injured, ever. With 100% certainty, they'll never be injured.
I mean, if I was a new parent listening to these unvaccinated stories over and over and over again, it would be game over for me. I'm going your way.
Yeah, I don't understand why you wouldn't. You know, if you're seeing an unvaccinated child completely healthy, thriving, alert, and then you see all these sick kids that are constantly going to the doctor and on antibiotics and vaccinated, and you see all the eczema that they have, or asthma, allergies, all these different things that kids are affected with. Choosing a healthy child versus an unhealthy child, that's really your choice.
When I heard about the bus, I was over the moon. And when we finally were able to see the bus directly and sign Steve's name on the bus, it was such an emotional moment.
You saw the emotion in the person that was either injured or the parents of the injured or dead child as they wrote their name. It was like a relief for them to write the name on the bus. Like someone is hearing them, someone is saying, yes, you're not alone. Yes, this did happen.
It gave a voice to the voiceless people who are cooped up in their homes, taking care of vaccine-injured children and vaccine-injured adults. And I knew that people would come out in droves.
People are everything. So once the people started talking, which they did in fact, and this is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, it's the other side have to wave the white flag now. It's over.
It's not like we're gaining anything by speaking out, you know? We're losing friends and family members, people won't talk to us, you're getting kicked out of mommy groups, you're getting kicked out of doctor's offices. It's not to our benefit to speak out, but if my story, or if any of our stories will help save one child from being injured or dying, then it's worth it. Because you can't walk away from something like this and know the truth and not say anything. You can't.
What have we done to all these people? We've taken their lives as they should have been. We've destroyed the brains of countless people around the world.
It can change. And it will change. And we will win this battle, if that's what it is. And we will win it through the parents' stories. We will win it through the parents telling their truth. We'll win it through the doctors and nurses standing up and saying, this is what I know to be true.
If I'd seen that vaccines can cause injury, outside of autism, injury beyond belief. If I'd heard that the doctors, the medical professionals, had no training in vaccines, and if I had seen the health of the unvaccinated, there is no way I would have feared measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, all these things that we vaccinate our children for. I wouldn't have feared them.
VAXXED, the film, will get a lot of credit, but the greatest credit, I really believe, to this movement and the change we will one day see will be owed to those parents out there, to those that told of their injuries, that were no longer afraid, those that brought their unvaccinated children and their stories forward, those who were brave enough to tell their story, that moved others to come and tell their story. And now all over the world, people telling their stories. That is the movement. That is what really happened. That bus, this tour, the people's story is what has changed the climate and the discussion around vaccines.
And we'll look back at this experience in 10 years' time and we'll say, what were they thinking?
So the bus can go on and on. We've only scratched the surface.